Welcome to another episode of Vision and Voices, where we delve into the intricate and dynamic world of family offices. I am your host, Chris Mays, a partner at Armanino, one of the top 25 consulting accounting firms. Here at Armanino, I have the privilege of leading our family office industry, helping ultra high net worth individuals and families navigate the complexities of wealth management, tax planning, and legacy preservation. In each episode of Vision and Voices, we bring you insights and expertise from leading professionals across various fields relevant to family offices. From legal experts and investment strategists to technology innovators and philanthropic advisors. Our goal is to provide you with the knowledge and tools to manage and grow your family's wealth effectively. Today we have a special guest, Mike Muniz. Mike is the Chief Revenue Officer of Canoe Intelligence. Canoe Intelligence is a technology company that automates data management for alternative investments using AI and machine learning. Canoe streamlines document collection and data extraction, reducing the manual and improving accuracy. Their platform enhances productivity, supports scalable operations, and provides actionable insights for better investment decisions. With over $5 trillion in assets under administration, Canoe is helping firms modernize and optimize their investment workflows. Mike began his career at Cambridge Associates, advising on asset allocation and manager selection. He then led analytics at Novus Partners and later headed global commercial efforts for Dealogix Connect, offering until its acquisition by Ion Investment Group. Mike, welcome to Visions and Voices. Super nice to have you on the podcast. And I'm wondering if you could share a bit more about your background and how you ended up joining Canoe Intelligence.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and appreciate you having me on and excited and thank you for the kind introduction. So yeah, my background, I started my career at Cambridge Associates. I was in, at the time, the consulting practice, which has evolved considerably over the last 15 years. I was working with about a dozen endowment foundation clients and a handful of single family office clients on asset allocation, manager selection, portfolio construction. And, one of the two of the takeaways I had there, I fell in love with alternative investments. I thought that sort of on the bleeding edge of allocation theory and managing performance from a risk-adjusted perspective. We saw, Cambridge Associates so focused on allocating to alts, and that really resonated with me too. On the flip side, when I was at Cambridge, I was responsible. I was the low man on the totem pole in these client relationships, and I was responsible for the reporting. Thankfully, we had a team. I was there of several hundred people in Arlington, Virginia, who would process statements and notices and financial documents and tax documents around the clock. And they would send the reports to me. I would review those reports, which would be sort of total portfolio performance reporting. And of course, I would find errors because the process was convoluted and highly manual. And send that report back, and we'd go through the process again. And that stuck with me. It was a cost center, but it was just such a highly inefficient process for my clients. And, I wanted to find a way to solve that later in my career. I did join a firm called Novus Partners after my stop at Cambridge. I wanted to get into operating and executing and sort of try my hand at startups. I was the 10th hire at Novus, wore all sorts of different hats and loved it. And similarly at Novus, one of our challenges for scale was managing data and documents. We had a team in India, and we couldn't keep up with the pace of growth because we were manually processing documents. So first two stops in my career, the same challenge emerged. And again, that stuck with me. As you mentioned, I got a chance to lead a business at Dealogix, did that through acquisition. And then in 2017, I up with a former colleague from Novus, Seth Brotman, who'd been working with a family office in New York City called Portage Partners. And Portage had developed a technology for their back office, on accounting. They'd built a front-end accounting platform. But as part of that, they'd also built a technology that would process documents and data for alternative funds. And they brought us in to assess the commercial viability of that product. And harkening back to my early days at Cambridge and Novus, the first time I saw this product, I immediately jumped, and Seth immediately jumped at the opportunity to go bring this to market. And so we went through a process in 2017 and 2018 to raise financing and commercialize and bring Canoe to the market at large.
Right on. Okay. Yeah. You know, it's funny because I used to use Cambridge. I think it was either in the late 90s or early aughts. And it was
Yep.
the game in town in terms of private equity manager selection. And I think hedge
Yep.
funds too, right? It was the only people were using it as such, right? They were saying, hey, look,
Yep.
we only want Cambridge as top quartile. You know, everybody, all the investment managers like, yeah, we're Cambridge top quartile, you know. And so you were right there, even in the beginning of your career, at the epicenter of what was going on in terms of using data to make decisions about alternative investments. And then the scaling issues hit just square in the face, which is, hey, they're sending out PDF statements, and the PDF statements, you know, the regulator doesn't force it to be in any form, right?
Correct.
So there's a lot of dispersion in terms of what data you're getting from each manager and the organization of that data. And so, yeah, you know, a couple of other steps, similar problem, but then you arrive at, oh my gosh, here's a technology which can solve that challenge.
Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to start my career at Cambridge. You know, I to your point, the epicenter of all, Cambridge made a name for itself, you know, by specializing in that asset class. But, you know, what I've found over the course of my career is that, you know, I saw it at Cambridge, you go through a really intense process to select a manager.
Yeah.
And you make the subscription, and then the fun starts, because you're sent a convoluted mess of statements and tax documents and investment memos and quarterly reports and annual reports. And you do that, you multiply that across dozens, hundreds, thousands of commitments or subscriptions. And this process is just entirely antiquated and frustrating. And it exists for investors big and small, right? At Canoe, we have clients, you know, we have over 400 clients across the allocator ecosystem, over 100 of them single family offices. We have some clients who have 25 positions or commitments. We have others who have over 100,000, right? We process documents for over 750,000 commitments in the alternative space across 40,000 fund vehicles. And the same challenge persists across large and small. And so we've been fortunate enough to sort of have been in the seat of the individual trying to deal with that mess of documents, trying to run the reports, access the data, verify the data, aggregate the data, normalize the data, all of these actions that are so difficult manually. We've been in that seat and you know, fortunately have been proud to sort of bring a technology platform that can automate that process end to end, right? And it really is, it's, you know, even just gathering the documents, right? GPs are posting to websites, Intralinks portals, sending emails, sometimes all three. As you mentioned, there's disparity in frequency and format. There's no such thing as standardization. And so we really think about this sort of as an end-to-end problem that we're solving. Let's go get the documents from the original source. Let's bring them into the ecosystem, process them, tag them, identify the entity, the fund, the doc type, relevant dates, rename the document, and then extract data from that document so that you can action that as part of your go-forward workflow. You have to report, you have to account on these funds across your entire portfolio. Let's make it easier to do that so that you can go think about investments you want to make or actions you want to take instead of sort of being buried within documents and data.
Yeah, that is a massive value proposition for family offices. We talked about it before we started recording, but can we jump in and see what it looks like? Because I mean, the use case is clear, but it'd be fun just to get our hands on the dials and see how it actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me share my screen here. I could spend, as you can imagine, you know, 30 minutes to an hour in our product. And you know, since we launched in 2017, it has really evolved, right? We sort of think of ourselves as a solution across back, middle, and front office document types and data sets. But, at our core, and, you sort of think at a high level, clients need to trust the data coming out of statements and cash notices. And that's where we started Canoe. That's been our focus, and we've sort of broadened and evolved from that ecosystem, or that focal point. So we'll focus, a few minutes here, just sort of walking through how our platform works, how our clients interact with the data, and ultimately what sort of value and impact that means, or we can bring to a client relationship. I came in here and I just want to confirm that you can see my screen okay.
I can see your screen.
See Canoe in the top left. Okay,
yeah.
Excellent. So we're in a single family office environment, Smith Investments. This client has complex portfolio structure. Partnership accounting is a challenge. Investing, hundreds of funds across dozens of entities, multi-generational. Our platform is, having been built within a single family office, really designed for that level of complexity. And so what you can see here is every row represents a document. Think of this almost as a centralized inbox, right? Instead of going out and downloading documents from portals, eFront, Intralinks, SunGard, or triaging different sort of centralized email inboxes from GPs, we bring everything and consolidate right here in one place.
You have connections to those third-party admins or other sources of the underlying fund docs that you've already built, and you just have to get the client to permission your ability to reach out independent of them and get those documents.
That's exactly right, Chris. So we have connect out to over 500 sources at this point. There's a long tail, certainly, but activation is simply accessing or gaining permission from the client and obtaining our own credentials, and then we fit those credentials into those connections we've established.
Oh, that's nice. So you're not sharing credentials with the client. You have your own independent.
Hugely important. There's from a security perspective, but also from an operational perspective. These portals most of them implement some variation of two-factor or multi-factor authentication.
Right.
And we need to be able to sort of manage that directly in the scripting on our side.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point. It's starting from the beginning of that process, we take on ownership of as much as possible, and ideally everything, right? Automated platform for documents and data. So every row is a document. Every column is a tag or classification assigned to that document. So, do we have a specific client account within this family office, an entity, a fund name, document types? So you can see here we have some account statements, call notices, K1s. We classify over 100 document types in our library. All the documents are stored in Canoe, so you can access them directly through the platform. We're cloud-based. About a quarter to a third of our clients use this as their primary DMS, where they can centralize access to all the documents. And they can even
So for all their private asset workflow, they're using it as the document management system for that.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you guys are you're effectively aggregating all these different sources. You're the centralized repository for.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, and that becomes really powerful because you find a lot of redundancy with investment teams and ops teams downloading the same document maybe several times. Yeah. We do it once, we provide central access, and then you can even permission your accountant or advisor to access a certain subset of documents for their own use. So we make that really easy. We have a lot of workflow embedded in Canoe, so you can access the document, but then you can see we actually automatically rename each document. So the document comes in typically in a nonsensical manner from the manager. This is a bit more structured, but the original file name is preserved, and then we standardize based on your own unique naming convention automatically, which is a huge pain point or sort of an underrated pain point that we found across our clients. And then we are, as I said, a workflow tool. So a key piece of Canoe is a value prop is industrialized technology that gives you full control while also giving you full transparency, right? So we want to remove your hands from the keys, but enable you and empower you to feel comfortable and confident in what is happening at every stage of the process. You can see exactly where the document came from, when it entered Canoe, who on your team has introduced that document or has perhaps modified or reviewed that document. You can comment on documents, assign them to colleagues. all of that workflow is embedded. And ultimately, then we extract data and push data into your downstream systems. So we have APIs with Archway, with Adapar, flat files with dozens and dozens of other systems. We integrate all of that unique reference information, IDs, symbols, short names, code names, to ensure that data and documents can flow very freely.
You've got Archway, Adapar, Tamarack, Black Diamond, but you also integrate with other systems?
Oh, absolutely. Those are just a handful of relevant systems for this environment, but we integrate to several dozen downstream platforms. We have an open API, which is for firms that are tech forward, extremely beneficial. And then we actually are seeing a lot of Snowflake adoption, and we have a data share with Snowflake that's pretty tech forward and efficient. Our view is we are entirely system agnostic, right? We fit into a client's tech stack and ecosystem, and we automate the manual work. And what that means is we have to ensure that data and documents, you're not using Canoe as a document repository, the data and the documents need to end up in some downstream location, in some cases, many downstream locations, depending on the client. And we enable that through direct integrations, flat file compatibility, files, all out of the box, and then custom design where needed.
But, you know, in a capital statement, I mean, they could call, like, the ending balance could be the net balance, or it could be balance, or it could be your ending value. There's like a million ways that a capital statement that you would get from a private equity firm or from a venture capital firm or a hedge fund would term that. Oh, you've got it right here, ending balance. But like, it may not look like this, right? So how do you extract the numbers out of a statement that could have, you know, could be wildly different than this one from Chelsea Partners?
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the value and part of the challenge, candidly. There is no such thing as standardization, as I mentioned earlier. And so what we do is, you know, because we've, you know, been around for now 7 years and, you know, built a machine learning model around 400 clients and 40,000 plus funds, we've trained the system to identify where data is and what data elements are provided within each fund statement, fund notice, statement K1, et cetera. And so all of this you're seeing here is transparency into the learning that has taken place. So in this case, you can see the yellow highlights represent how the technology has identified data within this document. And so you can, at all times, hover over, you can see exactly the data has been identified as by Canoe. And then on the left-hand side, you can actually see how we normalize that into our standard data library. So this is really important. We do all the standardization because no two managers report the same. We create a taxonomy that allows for comparison apples to apples across every fund manager. So you can see here, our terminology is ending balance, right? So whether it's called ending BAL, NAV, and all of that is tied directly to a Canoe data element termed ending balance.
Okay.
And that allows for consistency and broad applicability across all of your fund investments, which is really, really important. And we do that across almost, I think it's over 100 different data elements depending on the type of document. So it's dynamic. This is a private equity statement. These are all the types of terms that a GP may represent or report.
But if it had been a capital
in a document
or a distribution or any of these things. Okay, now why is it blinking?
Yes.
Oh, because
so I clicked on the left-hand side and I said, hey, I want to know where that ending balance comes from, or I want to see where this entity is identified. And so we bring direct auditability to the source document. So again, that transparency and control, you see exactly where that data is coming from.
Oh,
trust is so important.
Love you. Because like that's the hard thing in an audit is the manual work to go validate capital statements relative to the fair market values that you're showing on the fund of funds balance sheet.
Absolutely. We have a lot of fund of fund clients and a lot of their audit teams, even some accounting firms, their audit groups are using Canoe for this very purpose.
Yeah.
So what then becomes really interesting is, well, you know, we normalize this data from Chelsea Partners into our Canoe taxonomy. Adapar has their own taxonomy. Archway has their own taxonomy. Tamarack has their own taxonomy. So we create mapping tables between Canoe's terminology and all of those systems. So we take all the hard work around mapping and translation, embed that in the technology itself, and we automate the delivery of this data in the format and the translated sort of mapping that is required.
Okay. So that's basically, this is in a nutshell. Actually, can we go back to that one screen?
Sure thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So this in a nutshell is the pipeline, right? I mean, you're getting the statements via that big table we just looked at, and then
Yep.
the ML's working on each one of these statements and identifying these highlighted, and then you're normalizing your naming format, and then your whatever mapping you need to get into Black Diamond or Archway or Adapar, you're doing, and then are you then directly reaching out to Adapar and appending the Adapar data? All via
so in some cases, yeah. Adapar, we have an API. Archway, we have an API. Diamond, we have a few different formats and sort of looking at ACD, but we're agnostic, right? We want to make it as easy as possible to get this data into the downstream systems at scale, right? Across not just this document, but hundreds, thousands. And in some cases, that's API. In some cases, firms downstream don't have the API enabled, and so we'll design, bulk upload templates and formats that clients can schedule to be downloaded and uploaded directly into those systems.
So what are the 4 colored buttons at the bottom?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier workflow. A lot of our clients, particularly at larger scales, perhaps in the administrator space or custodian space, like a JP Morgan or State Street, they administer this process on behalf of many clients. And as part of that, they typically will run sort of a maker-checker model. And what they'll use Canoe for is then the maker, and they'll come in and sort of run an approval workflow. And so in this scenario, and let's say it's less than half of our clients will implement this, but it can be very powerful if done effectively. A user will come in, they'll be assigned basically a task list of documents in their queue. They'll review them, approve them, flag them, or ignore them as not relevant. And they can even come in and sort of comment on documents directly or assign them to a colleague for further review. All of those actions are saved and tracked so you can see full traceability and auditability on every user action on every document. One of the cool things, we like to think at this point, Canoe is almost on autopilot, right, with documents or funds that it's seen. But if a client did want to come in and say that, hey, look, we actually want to classify this fees element as something a little bit different. As a user with proper permissions, you can actually come in and retrain the model for your environment. It's sort of seldom done, but gets back to that point of control. Yeah. We're not a managed outsourced solution. This is a tool that clients can use themselves. And so Canoe will predict some values, but clients can come in and say, okay, I actually want to treat this as management fees and expenses instead. And I'm going to save and create this learning pattern and apply this to every Chelsea Partners document in Canoe. And in a matter of seconds, that updated learning will be applied. And then go forward as documents from Chelsea are introduced, it will default to the updated learning.
Wow. Okay, so it basically retrains the model to use the new nomenclature. Okay.
Yeah. And then a couple other things I'll show. As part of our extraction, we run validation to ensure that data makes sense within the context of each document. Again, back to trust and data quality. One of the examples there we've seen is in activity. We've seen historically, and it's ramped up over the last 5 years, phishing and sort of fraudulent call notices. Yeah. And so one of the things we do as part of this machine, it extracts all the data that a manager is presenting, including the beneficiary bank information, wiring details. We can actually compare that, and you can see this yellow document on the far left. We can compare the wiring details and information to the prior capital call notice. And if it's different, we'll flag that proactively. Yeah. And again, that gets back to user actions and trust. We want to flag that sort of shared intelligence to clients so that they can action accordingly.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the day that becomes a thing. Because there are days when we'll receive 75 different capital calls. And it's just a workload in and of itself to fulfill those capital calls. And I I do. I worry about that. What are one of those 75 fraudulent, and I think
Right.
it would, we've been very fortunate to never have an issue, but yeah, adding some protection around, hey, is it the same set of wiring instructions that the call came from makes
Right.
immense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Unfortunately, we've seen that flag triggered in real life for a number of our clients, and so yeah, that sort of protection is important. As you were talking there, and I think maybe I'll wrap up the demo here in a minute. I just introduced some documents, Chris, just to show you how quickly documents can be processed. So a handful of documents, I think, I dropped in from a folder. Those documents will be automatically tagged, classified, categorized, renamed, and then all of the data. So you can see I just dropped these in.
So the bolded ones here are the new documents?
The bolded at the top, exactly. Yeah. So you can see here, it just came in a minute ago. They've all been classified, processed, and you can see. I'll just go in and you can see that updated learning pattern, management fees and expenses, right? So again, that sort of carryover, user training, period over period, and you can see that update take hold. And this is 6 documents, right? So this is going to save someone 30 minutes of time, but you take that over 60, 600, 6,000, and you really start to extrapolate the value and the benefit of Canoe. And then, as mentioned, you mentioned sort of data output. We have all sorts of ways to get access to this data in certain formats, third party, out of the box, APIs, can be scheduled, can be customized. Yeah, big library of optionality, and speaks to that sort of flexibility and portability. Clients have to get access to this data in the format and system they want, and we enable that.
Given that it's 10/1, okay, and we're coming up on 10/15, my least favorite date of the year. I see that K1 inventory. It's the 5th one down on the left-hand side.
Yes.
What's in there?
So one of the key value props of Canoe, and it gets back actually to the value of our client base. We implement shared intelligence as much as we can, and what we mean by that is, because we see such a large swath of the industry, we can take insights from other clients and surface them to you if you're a client. And so one of the ways to do that is to say, all right, well, if you're invested in the same fund and another client of Canoe, and they receive a capital call notice, a K1, an account statement, you should also receive that document. And if you don't, we're going to flag that to you. There's a lot of alerting around that. As part of that, we're also going to track and provide you an inventory analysis of, all right, based on your portfolio, here's when we expect all of your K1s. Here's when they've come in historically. Here are the K1s you have. Here are the ones you're missing. Here's those that we deem are late. And here's those that we deem are still expected over the next few days, right?
Wait,
so this
you could build a product just around this portion, and that would be sufficient, right? I mean, that's like one of the hardest things. If you have some of these family offices have 600-700 K1s, and
absolutely,
just the workflow in terms of managing the process of getting those K1s. But wait, so not only are you doing machine learning, you're crowdsourcing effectively the receipt of K1s to update the total width of your client base.
Absolutely. It's an ecosystem, and there's a lot of unique benefit from that ecosystem. Now, importantly, we were built within a single family office, and we work with some of the world's largest and most prominent institutional investors and banks. We take privacy and security very seriously. So there's no tracing back to, Chris, you're actually the firm that had this.
Right.
But if we can tell a client that another of our clients has received this K1,
have received their K1s.
Here's the trend over how this happens over time. Right. If we do it carefully, it can be really, really valuable. And I think our clients appreciate that and find tremendous benefit there.
So K1 all data fields, so that's just the 19 faceplate numbers, or will it go into the notes and tables and the subsequent?
We do. It's a great question. So we do extract data from K1s as well, and it's the first page sort of template table that sometimes will extend to page 2, of course, but we're not doing any footnote extraction or interpretation. That may be something we look at over time. We've talked about that a little bit, but our clients ask for that. But we do extract data and furnish that data in a format that, is sort of applicable across all funds. And so, we see some clients find value in that. Others really just find value in the document inventory and tracking. But for us, it's just, look, if we're gathering all the documents, we're extracting all this data, we can enable and unlock workflows that maybe bespoke to a single client, might benefit other clients. It's not just about performance reporting. Obviously, that's our focus, but there's so many other workflows, benefits to having fingertip access to documents and data. It becomes an asset for our clients, right?
100%.
And they can be on their front foot.
I'm kind of excited. So we have done a couple of family offices recently with, a data lake like Snowflake. But if you can put all this data in a data lake and then have effectively a accounting or investor reporting bot because you look at an ERP system or just a general ledger system, it's like a low dimension database, right? It's just the data with a couple of different dimensions that tell you where that number fits in an accounting ledger. And so it use it, just being able to instantiate whatever report you want, enriched by whatever external data source you want from a data lake makes eminent sense. Hey, so tell me a little bit about data security and trust. Clearly you work with very large, focused, super discretion types of institutions and family offices, but what kind of data security and privacy controls do you have in place?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll off the comment you made about data into a data lake first, because I think it's an important one. As I mentioned, I think, what we're seeing is our most sophisticated clients are thinking about data as an asset, not as a chore. And what that means is if they can have access to as broad and deep a data set as possible at all times, regardless of whether they're using it on a daily basis, it puts them ahead of everyone else. And one example that we saw a few years ago, I think March, 2.5 years ago, when SVB was, sort of this splash crisis. We were talking to a lot of firms in the market who, were exhausting these, weeks-long fire drills to understand how they were exposed to regional banks, how their managers were exposed. At Canoe, we, in a matter of, a few hours, designed an output template that we activated and pushed to all of our client accounts.
Show 100% exposure to SVB.
Immediately. And not just SVB, FRB, Signature Bank, all the regional banks, right? And so they were able to download that file and say, instead of a week or two long project, they could say, all right, how do we want to action? How do we want to think? How do we want to analyze and go forward? And you can only do that if you have all the data at your fingertips. Again, that data had never been used in the past, but we were able to sort of provide value immediately. So that's really important and something that we stand behind, and I think our clients find really compelling. So.
Yeah, data is not a chore; it's an asset. I do
Absolutely.
love it. I get it, but it's only not a chore if you don't have to do the tens or hundreds of hours of a carbon-based intelligence, sifting through the data and organizing it into a spreadsheet manually to be able to do that, right? Which is, that's the whole point. That's the promise of AI and ML and
absolutely. Okay. It certainly can be a chore. We want to make sure it's not. So to answer your question though around security, we take it very seriously. We're SOC 2 certified. We've gone through all of the sort of deep DDQ processes with the biggest banks in the world. And I think the fact that we were built, as I mentioned earlier, within a family office that is deeply private, that ethos really stuck with us, or was sort of integrated into Canoe from day one. And we sort of always thought of, well, how can we maximize the value we're providing, but also optimize, confidentiality, security, and data protection. So it's top of mind. Some of the things we're seeing, obviously GDPR has been a topic that was maybe a hot topic a few years ago, but more DORA overseas, cybersecurity regulation going into effect in January. We have clients globally, right? Family office in Singapore, Middle East, Latin America, EU. And so we hear, because of that footprint, we hear from clients all the time of what's coming, what's emerging. I can't say that we're out there canvassing regulatory to ensure we're ahead of the game, but we have, because of our footprint, we get sort of fed this information to us, and then we can determine how best to ensure we're compliant and we have the proper protocols and security infrastructure in place.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, and then in terms of the future of wealth management technology, I mean, where will Canoe go from here? I mean, what's it going to look like in 5 to 10 years? And like, what trends do you see shaping the future of the industry and Canoe specifically?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's funny to think back 5 or 6 years ago when 6 or 7, I suppose, when we launched Canoe. Did we see, did we have a vision as to where we would be today? I think somewhat, but it's maybe taken a few different paths to get here. Yeah, I think obviously large language models are the hot topic right now. We're weary of them in that, back to the data protection, right? We don't want our clients' data going outside of Canoe's 4 walls. We're contracted and trusted to keep data safe. And so pushing data out to a ChatGPT like service is not tenable for us. But we are, we have a team of learning engineers, and we're kind of really pushing forward in, some of the large language modeling. Thankfully, we sort of have our own data set across the private capital space that we think is fairly unrivaled.
So I really get it. And you guys,
so we can sort of apply this.
Your ML engine homegrown, right? I mean,
absolutely.
You guys, extraction, you train that model up, and so it's not like
all
you're
proprietary.
using the API of ChatGPT to, adjudicate which is the ending balance, which is the beginning balance, what fund is from, et cetera.
No, exactly. It's all proprietary. Now, we're taking, hey, what does ChatGPT do well? Let's go and apply that and build that internally based on the infrastructure we have and the data that we have. And so, we're thinking about things that way, but yeah, absolutely. It's proprietary built technology, and that's critically important for us. But what I think that's going to do, I think, is a few things. It gets back to the data as an asset comments. I think that the more data you have, the more you can do. And so we're constantly thinking about how we can broaden the data sets and the document sets for which we're processing. I mentioned earlier, we started with CAF statements and call notices. That's broadened quite significantly. And so, the next iteration of that for Canoe, and I think for the wealth management industry, certainly for single family offices, is understanding portfolio company information, asset level data in as close to real-time capacity as possible, right? You can get a lot of this information out there today on significant lag, but a lot of this information is reported through documents. And so let's sort of take that model we've built and train it, point it towards schedules of investments, financial statements, quarterly reports, so that we can build, like we've done a fund master, a true asset master, a portfolio company master, and derive value in that way. So that's really exciting for us, and I think it should transform how wealth managers and family offices sort of think about how they interact with their clients, with their principals, and with their portfolio. Right,
because all these private asset managers, they always write a letter, right? They talk about portfolio companies. I mean, they talk a lot more about the winners versus the losers.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, but they're, I mean, if we're like the capital statement, if we're to talk about the variation around the capital statement, the variation around investment letters is, if the variation around capital statements is this wide, the variation around investor letters is super wide. So, but I guess I can see how you guys could use a large language model to take, that investor letter as some form of a prompt and extract out in a common format to make it as comparable to other fund managers. And I think that would be super cool, because then you'd be able to get like asset level individual companies inside these blind pools.
Yeah,
You'd be able to get an understanding of how each company's performing.
Absolutely. And a lot of that information is warehoused within charts or graphs, the pie charts with, a small percentage allocation, within the pie, so it's difficult. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's an immense dispersion of formatting in how managers report on these assets. But absolutely, I mean, if you can get a better handle on how you're exposed, how you're positioned, how those underlying assets are performing. Family offices are single families are so active in the direct space. They can hedge out. They can play in the secondaries market. There's so much investment decision making you can make, or sort of you can optimize your level of investment decision making if you have a clear understanding of what you own down to the asset, how those are performing. You evaluate your fund managers, effectively, right? You can start to think about, Canoe Shared Intelligence. 2 fund managers are invested in the same portfolio company. One marks the fair market value every quarter 25% higher than the other. Why the dispersion, right? Can you start to compare how your fund managers are marking their assets and ultimately then can realize gains on those assets? It becomes really, really interesting and certainly elevated.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, that is super exciting, because I was just at the Family Office Exchange conference in Chicago, like 6 weeks ago or maybe 2 months ago, and they showed a slide how the family office allocation to privates. It may seem like a relatively small change. I mean, it was the difference between historical 10 years ago was 20% allocation to alts. Now it's a 30% allocation of alts, primarily coming out of liquid equities. And
yeah,
well, that's only 10% change. When you're looking at $40 trillion of assets, it's a giant number.
Absolutely.
And hence
absolutely
the boom in privates. But therein lies the rub, right? You don't have as good, you have a brokerage account and you're getting you're getting on your dashboard, you're getting minute by minute marks for net asset value. And with your privates, you're seeing, like, at least in private equity, you're seeing once every quarter a capital statement, and then you got to sift through that capital statement. So what you guys would potentially be able to do in the future would be able to take those investor statements, give month by month or even maybe more often commentary, as well as enriching the data from other private sources, which gets you as close as you possibly can get with the available information to what a marketable security ecosystem looks like.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's exactly right. If we can get you as close as possible, and you're never going to be there because there is a gap and there's a delay, but if we can reduce the information gap, right? The data is in the documents. So we can surface that data to you in a way you can action it as quickly as possible. That closes that gap between privates and publics, which, as you mentioned, private equity allocations, private market investment allocations are only increasing, and firms need to understand total portfolio performance. And so narrowing the gap between publics and privates is so important. And I think we're excited to play a key role in that.
Yeah. Hey, so if there's one key takeaway for our audience today, what would you like them to know about the role of technology in the future of wealth management?
That's a great question, Chris. I don't know if I have sort of one enlightening comment. Yeah, right. It's going to take all our jobs. No, look, I think that adoption, firms that are thinking, in a tech-forward, innovative way and adopting technology to enable them to focus on higher order tasks, and punching data from a document into a spreadsheet is not higher order task.
Totally.
The firms that are, adopting that sort of scrutiny, how can we apply technology in-house to level up our people? It's going to make your entire organization more efficient, more effective. And essentially, it's going to give you a competitive advantage, right? This isn't a competitive landscape, but in some cases it can be, right? There's limited access to funds, there's information edge, there's limited access to talent. And so is if you can be sort of at the tip of the spear on these things through a tech-forward, tech-enabled operational infrastructure, we think that's the way to go.
Yeah, that is a fantastic point, right? I mean, let the silicon do the jobs that silicon can do, and let the carbon do the jobs that it does best. And nobody wants to sit there, even in India, taking the numbers out of capital statements and inputting them into a form or a spreadsheet, or that's just not a job any person wants.
No, it's too risky. It's too cost ineffective, and the turnover in staff, it doesn't make sense for where we're at and what technology is available in the market.
Yeah. Hey, as a leader in the tech space for family office, what motivates you personally to keep driving innovation at Canoe?
Yeah, look, I've been fortunate to be here since day one. So to see the evolution and that, it's what we're doing and who we're working with and the team that we've built and the investors we have, all of that just gives me tremendous energy every day, and it excites me. I think we certainly like to think that we're still in the early innings of where we're going as a business, right? I think we've established a phenomenal client base, but that gives us, we've sort of earned the right now to think about what else can we do and how else can we transform the industry. There's a lot of inefficiency in how GPs, LPs, and administrators communicate, correspond, collaborate. And we sit right in the epicenter of all three of those constituencies. So I think there's a really unique opportunity for us at Canoe to transform a lot of that, to provide, a lot cleaner, more efficient, more available data to clients, to LPs, so that they can make investment decisions and sort of run their businesses more efficiently. So, I'm as excited, if not more excited today than I was when we launched, or maybe when we closed our Series A, because we knew we were actually, going to stick around. But it's an incredibly exciting time for Canoe and, the direction we're headed.
Awesome. Well, hey, Mike, this has been great. I really enjoyed getting the chance to do today on the podcast. I mean, so many cool insights and love the demo. It was great to actually see the tech operating. So congratulations. I mean, it does look like a fantastic platform. And if folks want to get in touch and learn more about Canoe, where should they go?
Yeah, Chris, and thanks so much for having me. It's a great conversation. Really enjoyed it, and really appreciate you having me on and allowing me to tell you and the audience more about Canoe and what we're doing. So, our listeners, our watchers can go to our website, canoeintelligence.com, click request a demo. That'll route you to an individual on our commercial team. We'll typically respond close to immediately. And you can also send an email directly to info@Canoe Intelligence. That'll similarly be directed to our commercial team, and can jump on the phone and talk through what we're doing and how we might be able to help.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Speak